just like to start by introducing myself, and then per Ellie's idea, we can go around and give a context to who's here this evening. So, welcome to the memorial for Michael Gifford. He should rest in peace. Um, my name's Avram, and I knew Michael very well from Christian Island. And one day I was coming out of the main store, the where people do their grocery shopping, and I saw this fellow who was a little bit hunched over. You remember how Michael used to walk? And he was barefoot, of course. Hi, Joseph.
Hi, everyone.
And I said to him, I said, "My, the rocks must hurt your feet." And he turned around and glared at me and said, "Fuck off." So we who know Michael know that's a really good opener, actually.
I don't believe that story. I've never heard of Michael swear in his entire life.
Right. Michael wasn't much for curse words, right? And exactly after that, we became friends. That night, I went down to his boat. You'll remember his older boat, and he played guitar for me, and we smoked a couple of joints, the first of many. And I really, really, really enjoyed my time with him right from the genesis of our relationship. I did because I like quirky middle-aged men. I find them fascinating. Michael was very brash. He was very straightforward, but he was also extraordinarily vulnerable. He was a man of many, many talents. I want to show you one talent that he had. He made me frames Christian Island.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, really nice. Sorry, I took some wood from your island guy, but it was made into a frame, so I figured it was okay. And over time, Michael and I got to be better and better friends, and I got very excited because my dear friend Ellie Rubenstein, who will introduce himself in a second, he owns a cottage, leases a cottage up at Christian Island, and I thought, well, I'll put the two of them together because I think they'll like one another. They were both extraordinary storytellers and good people and interesting and always fascinated by life. So I introduced the two, and ultimately what happened was Ellie said to Michael, "You know what? I could use some help at the cottage." And Michael said, "Well, that's great because I'm looking for a place to live." And subsequently, they became partners, and Michael watched over Ellie's cottage, and he was up there with his dog Zodie. Also, rest in peace. One thing that I think personifies Michael very well is I would take my son up there, Noah, who is now 17. And at the time, he was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. And as young boys do, he fell in love with Zodie, who was Michael's dog. And Michael's dog, Zodie, was an island dog. And for those of you who understand what islands are all about, Zodie would wake up in the morning, run downstairs. Michael would have food for him, and then he would go off and play with squirrels and other dogs the entire day. And he also loved to play with people and young kids. I know Charlie is here. I think Charlie had a good relationship with Zodie. Um, and then one day Michael said to us, "Why don't you take Zodie home for a couple days?" Well, and I kind of looked at him, having been a dog owner, and dog owners don't usually do that. And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, why do you offer that?" He said, "Because I see the great relationship that Zodie has with Noah. And I think that Noah would really appreciate having a dog in his life for a couple of days." So we took Zodie back to Toronto with us, and Zodie spent time with Noah, and Noah spent time with Zodie, and Zodie would jump up on Noah's bed at night and lie there quietly until Noah went to sleep. And then Zodie would find his way into the living room, and he would lie down and ultimately fall asleep too. But that was such a beautiful gesture, and to me, that personified who Michael was, and in our relationship for sure. He was a loving and caring and loyal friend, and I loved him dearly, and my son loved him dearly, and he is greatly missed. There is no other man, no other person like Michael Gifford, and he brought a lot of illumination to my world, to our world, and no doubt to the people who are here tonight. So we are commemorating the life of Michael Gifford, who came and left too quickly, but had an incredible impact on all of us And in Hebrew, we say, Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kal Yisrael V'imru Amen. There should be peace in our world, peace through kindness, peace through charity, peace through love, which is all the things that Michael extended to others. Let's quickly go around the room and see who's here with us. Glenna, who are you, Glenna?
I'm Glenna Wedge. I live in Penetang. I don't know with this square here. What am I supposed to do with this? Am I supposed to leave it on or?
Yeah, you're okay. Just tell us who you are. You're fine.
Okay, so I met Michael through through another friend, and she says, "Do you want to go to Christian Island and see my friend there and stay the weekend?" And I thought, okay, I'll go and see. I said, I don't know if I'll stay the weekend, but we'll go and see. And I was treated with such respect and welcoming. I felt very comfortable there. And I think that he actually asked me to do a paint quote on the cottage. He was looking after the cottage for Eli. So it turned out to be, yeah, like a weekend away, and we had a good time. There was some great times in there. The girls partied all night. I cried in my van and got locked in a few times, and he thought that was hilarious. And he finally showed me that there was a lock on the doors that you could flip up or down so that I wouldn't get locked in, because I kept having to phone them and tell them that I was locked in and couldn't get out. And so they thought that was pretty hilarious. But they let me get locked in a few times before he showed me the escape route.
Yeah.
Glenn, I'm still waiting for the painting quote.
All right, Glenna, thank you. We'll come back
I
to you
don't
later.
anymore, honey. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Diamond Egg is here with us. Guy, welcome. Tell us who you are, and perhaps this is the time to bring in a native sort of context here to what we're doing, as Michael related very much to the native community.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I was surprised to see the invitation last week, and I was looking forward to being here. And I'm a former chief of Christian Island, and I have this memory of Mike, and it's a short one, and I'll tell you that my place is not too far from the dock, and on this hot August day, I seen somebody coming down my road, and there's no trees or shade on my road. And as he got halfway down my road, I realized it was Mike. And of course, he had no shoes on, and it was hot out. And I don't know how he managed to get down that hot road with no shoes on. So he gets to my place, and I'm sitting under my shade tree. And he noticed right away as he passed from the sun into the shade, he goes, "Oh my God, it's like 10 degrees colder in the shade here." I enjoy my shade tree here in front of my place. But Mike was always a pleasure to meet up with. And our connection was music. And other than that, like the talking about construction projects and just stories in general. And I mean, we talked for hours when we did connect. And I really don't have a lot of time for that kind of stuff. But when there was something going on at Ellie's cottage, I would make sure I got down there. And when there was a jam or something going on, so I always enjoyed that. Even some winter nights, there'd be something going on down there when Ellie wasn't there. And I actually didn't meet Ellie until about 5 times being at his cottage. And I think it was at the 6th time I finally met this Ellie guy that everybody talked about. And Mike was looking after the cottage. So it was always a real pleasure to go down there and take my guitar and jam with Mike and anybody else that was there. And I'll share a little story later on after the introductions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Guy. I want to jump to Michael's dear brother, David. David, go ahead.
Oh, hi, everybody. It's nice to see everybody here. I'm honored, Avram and Eli, that you've organized this for my brother. And I can't say anything that nobody's not familiar with already about Michael. But I miss him. He was a brother and a friend, and he was older than me, so it was, he taught me a lot. So he was kind of a father figure in many ways as well. But we had lots of adventures together. Anyone knows the Beckwith Island story? We were on many sinking boats together. So good times, and I miss him dearly. His love for animals, of course, people, and he was kind and generous. And he knew things that lots of people didn't, these about mechanics, and particularly the land around Georgian Bay and the history. And of course, it's inextricably tied with its people. And I just wanted to thank you all for being here.
Thank you, David. I want to welcome Rabbi Weber. Rabbi Weber was a prominent rabbi in Toronto, and he's in the States now. Welcome, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Now, Ellie, as we all know, had an open door policy then and now. People are always invited to his cottage, and he shares, I think, the beauty of his life with the rest of the world. That's the beauty of Ellie Rubenstein. Did that with Michael. He does that with me and most others. And he did with that with the rabbi and his family. I know, Rabbi, you used to go up there and visit the cottage with your family quite often, correct? Go ahead, Rabbi.
Yeah. I just wanted to add, and my wife will join as well, Ladina. I'm on the call for Michael. Firstly, just really a thank you to Ellie. Very few people would do what you did and continue to do. And our children have such amazing memories of our photos. The nicest photos are those from the cottage. And Mike was really part of it. We would come and we would always leave after a day because there was always a crisis back at the synagogue. 2 days, 3 days. It was never really more than that. And Michael, everything worked, I remember, because we would come unexpectedly, leave unexpectedly. We only had that one day to get out on the boat, and things weren't really set up. He would just make things work. That's the part of Michael that I knew. Always made things work, and maybe that was a lifelong motif. But he would just make things work. Timing wasn't great, he would make it work. Boat wasn't quite up to par, he would make it work. That was Michael. Does that resonate? Does that ring a bell among the others who knew him?
Yeah.
And yeah, he was there for us. Always pleasant, always positive. That was him, and that's such a tremendous legacy, because the most important part of us is just how we carry ourselves, our dispositions. And he was positivism. That was him.
Yeah.
How was he with the kid? How was he with the kids, Rabbi?
He was amazing. He was just
our kids loved him.
Yeah, my wife is with me. Let me put her on.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
We're at the car now. But Mike was such a there was really a special place in our heart that he held. He was just part of our family. When we came, all our kids just felt close to him. He wanted to give them a good time. He was like, let me take you out of my boat. It was all in. He just wanted to just give us a good time. And he did. And our family's best memories are at the cottage with Mike. And of course, Zodie. I have a picture of my kid sitting on top of Zodie. I mean, how much more awesome could you get? They really, really enjoyed. And we really miss him. We really do.
He would join us for dinner sometimes. He liked kosher hamburgers. So that that we had quite many dinners together, actually. Yeah. Are kosher hamburgers as good as the non-kosher version? I'll never know. And he never insinuated that they're not. He never gave anything away.
He liked my cooking. He liked my cooking. It passed. It passed.
Rabbi, what I found interesting about your relationship with Michael, as well as your wife and your families, is that your lifestyles were dramatically different, to say the least. Yet you got along splendidly.
Yeah.
Well, humor goes a long way, and we're all people, no matter what backgrounds we are.
Right.
We're all the same. We all have the same needs, the same wants, desires, and my husband may wear black and white, but he's just as kind, and Michael's just as kind, and we're all a people. We're all children of God, and he felt it, we felt it, and we really, had really fantastic memories
Very
with
good.
him.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There was a sort of a quirky system within the Gifford family, whereby Michael had uncles that were younger than him. And he used to get a kick out of that. And Joseph Boyden, you're Michael's uncle, correct?
I am indeed.
Yeah. And he
I'm a
used
proud uncle, yes.
right. And he used to get a kick out of that. I think he called you Uncle Joseph, did he not?
Yeah, Uncle Joe. That was
so
always confused people, strangers. They're always deeply confused by that. Is that
maybe
my sister Teresa, by the way? Do I see? Is that Teresa? Hi.
So maybe you want to explain that and just give a context to why you're here and some of your memories of Michael.
I first met Michael when I was in the womb. He was my mom, Blanche, who's 92 now, just turned 92. He loved her very much, and she sends her love and regards to everyone. I grew up with Michael all of my life. He was a big part of it. As David said, he knew so much. I was always amazed by this nephew, this man who really should have been my uncle, this older man who could fish, who taught me how to lay bricks, to garden, to fix cars. With so many adventures with Michael and broken down cars and boats that he always managed to string together and get working again. Michael was incredibly intelligent, very, very smart being. He definitely had wisdom, and with that wisdom, he had a great sense of humor. And that's how I'll always remember Michael. He was a real charmer too, with the ladies. He loved nothing more than he was in the hospital in Parry Sound last few months, and really won over the nurses. Is very sweet. He was a traveler. I lived in New Orleans for 25 years or so, and he made sure to come down and visit me. And we had many adventures there too. He was a huge music fan, and so New Orleans was just the perfect place for him to be. He was very stubborn as well. If you knew Michael, you know that he was a stubborn guy. I really saw that in the last year and a half or so, in a good way. He ended up, with the death of his daughter, Michelle. I think that really crushed him, obviously. And he ended up in Parry Sound with me. And it was a family gathered around him, and we needed it, I think. And it was really important. He always knew that he had family. And he stayed I got him in a hotel, assisted living in Parry Sound for a number of months. And he kind of loved it. I'd come over, I'd bring him food and Diet Coke, which he drank far too much of. And we talked a lot. We got to hang out quite a lot because he ended up really having a good experience there, I think. He ended up getting pretty sick and had to leave that hotel, but he fought it hard. And that's why he was in the hospital the last few months. It wasn't so much that, you know, his body was failing, as that they were trying to find a place for him, and they'd finally found one for him, and he was to leave a few days before he passed. But, you know, the Michael I knew as a kid, I looked up to, and the Michael I knew as a man, and spent with him, I will always look up to him. He really, you know, he a lot of bumps in his life, a lot of, you know, hard luck. Yet, you know, there were times when he'd been through a lot, but I never witnessed that make him into a hard man. And I thought that was really a special thing. That, you know, he could be angry. I saw him really angry. It's when he was in deep pain, physical pain. It's the only time in my life I'd ever seen him angry like that. But it was the pain, and he explained to me, you know, I don't want to be a burden, you know, and that's exactly, you know, how I'll remember Michael, is him fighting for himself and for a place. And, you know, it was really heartbreaking that they finally found him a place and he was going to go, and he was nervous but excited, and you know, I hope he's in a better place. You know, something really sweet about him, in his possessions, I found a bottle of wine. It's like, oh, that Michael. But I read the note, and it was for one of the nurses who'd been looking after him. He had very limited funds, but he'd found money to get her a nice bottle of wine to before he moved. He told me, you know, make sure she gets that. And so, you know, that's Michael to me. Those are the memories of Michael that I'll always cherish. He got to meet my sons, Desi and Tiba, who are 4 and 5, when they were a little bit younger, and they just, you know, they stared at him and took him in and were immediately very comfortable with him. And, you know, people have spoken about Michael and children. I think that's a great part of him, is that there was an innocence about him, despite, you know, a life of experience. And I think children felt that in him. They felt that they could learn something in him. They felt safe and comfortable with him. And I thought that was, you know, something that my boys showed him. We'd bring him over for Sunday dinner once in a while, and I'd make sure to give him, you know, make him lamb, because he loved a leg of lamb or a turkey, or he was quite the gourmand. He loved just to sit back and watch Laura and I cook and have fun with the kids. I will cherish those times we got to spend, you know, and despite him, you know, I think all of us feel this at one point in our life, despite our being physically close. I didn't see him as much as I wanted to, because I didn't expect Michael to pass, not like he did, and not so quickly. And suddenly I kicked myself for saying, you know, I could have seen him more. I could have gone over more. I could have helped him out more. But I don't think he ever felt that. You know, Michael wouldn't want, I don't think any of us feeling, I think he'd be so tickled right now. I could even see him using the word tickle to see all of us gathered here right now speaking about him. He was somebody who had that twinkle in his eye, you know, and all of us know that. And his, you know, the image of him I'll always have is his Australia hat that he loved, and his sailboat, and being on that boat, you know, that was his place in Georgian Bay, on the waters of Georgian Bay. The last thing I'll say right now is I've been working on a novel for a long time. That's a follow-up to a novel called The Orenda, and it begins contemporarily with a former Jesuit who is now an archaeologist who's digging on Christian Island. And the reason I tell you this is because so many faces I see here there's bits and pieces of all of you in this novel. There's this long-haired man who lives on a boat off of a rabbi's cottage, and so I've kind of married together Avram and Ellie as a character in this novel, and this long-haired man becomes a real trickster in the story. This former Jesuit digs up the body of a young indigenous woman who's been mummified, and he literally absconds with the body against the wishes of the band of Christian Island. Guy, you talk about music. There's a bit of you and Michael, because I've heard all of those stories for so long. There's the music in it too, and Christian Island and Beausoleil and Michael. You know, I was writing this while he was still alive, and I wish I'd always planned to read him a few chapters to give him a kick, because his character is pretty prevalent in what he does in a number of the first chapters. And I never got a chance to, but I'll read it to you, David, and you can judge it for me. But you know, thank you, Avram and Ellie, for bringing us together and bringing Michael's spirit back to sit with us for a bit today. It's really good to see a lot of familiar faces and family who I miss very much, and people I've not met as well. So appreciate you all.
Thank you, Joseph. Ellie and I look forward to royalties, of course.
And can I just clarify something, Avram? When Joseph said that he married Avram and Ellie together, he was speaking metaphorically.
Yes,
not
yes.
literally.
We're not married. Ellie and I are not married. I have proposed,
many
but-
times.
Joseph,
I'm a Jill.
Joseph, I remember being with Michael one night in the small cottage, as we called it, and he was making a wonderful dinner for me. He was indeed a gourmet cook. He was a marvelous cook. And I believe that you had just sent him a copy of your novel that had recently come out, and he was so incredibly excited about it. There's a word in Yiddish, nachas, which translates to mean pride. And he had great pride in you and your writings. And the fact that you were a character, he would be a character in your book, I think at some point in time you had told him, and he really couldn't believe it. He just thought that was absolutely incredible. So you honored your nephew within his life and now after his life in a very auspicious way, and good for you. There's a short paragraph I want to read. Heather is here with us, and she asked me to read something from her heart, of which she wrote back in the early 80s. I was a girlfriend to Michael's brother, Chris, for a couple of years. I love the family's connection to nature and animals. Michael was always warm and welcoming. Through Facebook, I was able to reconnect with both him and David these past many years. I am grateful for that. I learned much from the Giffords, and I agree with that. There was a lot to learn from Michael. Ellie was telling me today when we talked, when you spoke with Michael, you never, ever, ever got bored, because he either had a story to tell or he had a thought, he had an insight about life, which he would subsequently share with you. So Heather, your sentiments, I think many of us share that. Did you want to add anything to that, or does that suffice?
Yeah, hi, I'll say something. First of all, I miss your Mohawk, Uncle Joe. I don't know if you remember. And and Aunt Teresa, I remember you. We took care of your dog on the farm, and you sent us the dog with the. Do you remember with the
I do.
with the dog
Yes.
house, the insulated dog house? So
Yeah.
I joined the Giffords for a couple of years. I met them and met Chris when I was 19 on Proctor Avenue. And I've fallen in love with the Giffords ever since, and I've learned so much. And what I remember about Michael was at one point he was doing landscaping. And so we went with him up to the tree farm to get a bunch of cedars to plant. And I learned about planting cedars, which I still use to this day. And I learned about doing interlocking stone.
Yeah.
And seeing that
It's
people use
beautiful.
proper screening, because a lot of people don't. And I think of Michael every day when I see that, because so many people don't do it correctly. So anyways.
Heather, you have to come up to the cottage, because everything you're talking about, you'll see in his landscaping there. Now you have an official invitation. One of the few.
He did that. Is that Ellie speaking?
Yeah, it's Ellie.
It's Ellie. Yeah, see exactly what you're talking about. He did up at the cottage. Beautiful landscaping.
And your driveway is perfect now, right?
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
all Michael's.
Yeah.
touch.
And I was up at Beckwith on one of those boats, and I survived, and I had a wonderful time. So I miss Michael. I reconnected with him through Facebook, like I did with David. And then, of course, I took an art class from David. And I was amazed. I used to love listening to his insights and his musical taste. So he's well missed. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Teresa, do you want to add something to that?
I certainly do. Michael was a wonderful boy up at our cottage, and he'd always fish, loved fishing. And he'd like to sit in the rowboat that was tied up, pretending he was rowing down the lake. Only one time it did come undone, and he was rowing down the lake without a life jacket on, which was my rule, life jackets on. And his mother had to go down in front of all the cottages in her granny nightie in order to get out and grab him and bring the boat back. So that was Michael. He always loved water, and he always loved boats, loved fishing. And I never once ever asked him to help me, that he didn't. He was a terrific kid and a terrific young man. And during the time, one year we were on a trip to Florida. There were 8 children in the station wagon with my sister Angela and myself driving to Florida. We went to Disney World, and Angela insisted we were staying to see the lights at 10 o'clock. So, all right, fine. And she had insisted all the time she was going to drive, but she got in the car and went to sleep. So I had to drive in the black of night in an area where I didn't know where I was. Guess what? Michael had his head on my shoulder the whole time saying, "Are you all right now, Aunt Teresa? Do you need me to help you in any way? Are you all right?" And we spent the night in the parking lot of a police station, because that's the only safe place I could see to go. Yeah.
And I just want to add to that memory, which was a tremendously fun trip, that David was the baby.
He was.
So he was everybody's baby. All of us piled into that station wagon, having the best time taking care of baby David. So, and I just want to add that I'm Mary Martha, Michael's cousin, so Teresa's eldest daughter. And my memories of Michael, in our years growing up and playing together and visiting Joseph, who was a little boy, and all the kids, was always of this sweet and gentle and kind, lovely cousin.
Yeah,
he was just fun, but quiet, gentle, and kind always. So my memories of him are only of the very, very best, of a sweet guy.
Yeah.
You're talking about fishing. I remember Michael, he worked with some kids on the island who had too much time on their hands, according to Michael, teaching them how to fish. I remember he had a number of fishing poles, and he thought this would be a great sort of nonprofit to start up to help the kids in the area. Absolutely. And I think he was intent upon doing such things, Aunt Teresa. I think you're right. Michael was just a kind man, very kind man.
Yeah, we all loved him.
Yeah, we did. We did indeed. Now, there's different perspectives here from the various different people who have attended tonight. Cousins, friends, family. There's also a next door neighbor. Derek is there with his wife, Julie, and Charlie. Is there anyone I missed? Anybody I missed who's there? Okay. Derek, you're muted. You got to unmute. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes, we're all here. We are all here.
You're the neighbors. What was your perspective on Michael Gifford?
Well, I have a couple of stories I'd like to tell about Michael, but I remember the first time I met him. Somehow or another, it came up. Like, I asked him where he was from, and he told me he'd grown up in Thornhill, and I responded to him that my parents were from Thornhill, and I'd spent some of my childhood there. And he said, "Well, what is your name? What's your last name?" And I said, "Well, my last name is Finkel." And he furrowed his brow, and I could see the wheels turning in his head, and for a second I thought he was trying to figure out if I was Jewish or not, because that's what the response I get from many of Ellie's guests is whether I'm whether I'm Jewish or not. But actually, he said, well, what's your father's name? And I said, well, my father's name is Ralph. And I could see him now. He's like, no, Ralph, no, I don't. Is there another? Are you related to anyone else? And I said, well, I have an uncle named Carl. And he goes, Carl, your uncle is Carl Finkel? And I said, yes. I said, do you know him? And he said, oh my God. He said, your uncle is a few years older than me. And when we were growing up, I used to come and watch him and his band play. My uncle was in a band, which those who are over maybe 40 or 50 will know, called Martha and the Muffins. Yeah. And Michael used to come and watch my uncle and his comrades play. And I said, well, I said, you must have spoken to my uncle, so you know him. And he said, well, no, I said, I never got the guts up to actually say anything to him. And I said, we're going to get my uncle up to the island and play in one of your cottage jams on Ellie's back deck. And he said, and then when he asked me what I did, and I explained that I was a writer and an editor, he started boasting about you, Joseph. And he didn't really know that I was already reading your work. I was very familiar with who you were. Had already read the Orenda, and by the way, kudos to you for that. I really enjoyed it. And he also told me, if I recall correctly, that you went to Bray Boeuf. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. And so anyway, he said, I'm going to get my uncle to come up, and we'll get your uncle to come up. And, it'll be like a giant uncle fest. And I said, well, this sounds amazing. So anyway, So I'll come back to music in a second, but really the biggest thing the best thing really that came out of our relationship with Michael was that our son Charlie was quite young at that time, and Charlie kind of became his last fishing buddy, I think, really. And they would go out on the sailboat in his little boat, which, speaking of being into women, he lost his fishing boat on a trip he made to the mainland one time, and he was in a sailboat and he was dragging his little boat that he took Charlie out fishing on, and he sailed past the southern tip of Christian Island, and then all of a sudden the weather was horrible, and he was trying to get to meet this Australian female friend that he had, whose name I can't recall now, but he was determined to
Glenna, you might remember.
Sorry?
I think Glenna might remember. Glenna, do you remember her name?
Zodie. She's my best friend, and actually that was the friend that introduced me to Michael.
Oh, okay. And anyway, he was determined to go and meet with her, and then the storms hit, and his little boat started filling with water, and he had to take a machete and cut the rope so that his sailboat didn't go down with the little boat that he was. So that was just but I remember in the summer of 2016, he used to take Charlie bass fishing, and somehow or another, Mike had obtained an aquarium, like a fish aquarium, a big one, a really big one, and somehow or another, while I wasn't at the cottage, he got the aquarium put on Ellie's dock. And I was not really sure what he was planning to do with this aquarium on a dock. And so anyway, he and Charlie went out fishing one afternoon, and they came back with a handful of good-sized bass. And he got Charlie to fill up the aquarium with Georgian Bay water, and then they put their catch for the day in the aquarium. Right. And Mike was careful to put a couple boards over the aquarium because he assured us that they could jump out. And so he had dinner for a couple nights. Anyway, a week later, a terrible storm blew in across Georgian Bay. There were winds of over 100 kilometers an hour. And I was on the island. Mike was there. Charlie was there with a friend of his. And it was crazy. People's docks were turned upside down, ripped apart. It was an insane storm. And a part of Ellie's dock unfortunately, the part with the aquarium and the fish in it went under, and the fish were gone. And I don't know whether Mike was more upset about losing the fish or losing the aquarium or having a bunch of glass under the dock. Like, I'm not really sure what was the worst part of the scenario for him, but it was kind of a little bit of a disaster. And but a week or two later, this was in August of 2016, and as many of you will recall at the time, Gord Downey and his band, the Tragically Hip, were doing their sort of farewell tour, and Julie's aunt, Sandy, who had a really nice relationship with him, and they had spent a lot of time on Mike's boat with him, and having cocktails and so forth. And she unfortunately passed away the next summer in 2017, cancer. But the summer before, they had an amazing time, and it kind of culminated with the last Tragically Hip concert. And because we had television, a satellite dish, Mike came over to our cottage, and he was so happy. And Julie and I really vividly remember the two of them like sitting on these little log stools right in front of the television with their cocktails and singing, and people like from the same generation, and just there was nothing wrong with dancing and singing, and they just were so happy. And it's a really nice memory. And so we really Julie helped Mike many times. He came over in the winter time to have meals with us in the rare occasion when we would visit in the winter. And one year she realized that Mike came over and he didn't have any socks on. He had no socks on. There was like 3 feet of snow. So Julie got down on her hands and knees and like got the warmest socks she could find in the cottage and like put the socks on Mike, and we got some boots on Mike, and I helped him, get back to the little cottage in the snow. And anyway, he was this sweet, sweet guy, and I'm really glad that he had Charlie as his last fishing buddy, and we had some really great times up there. So
thank you, Derek.
I'll
Does
end it there.
Julie or Charlie want to add anything?
I feel like Derek said it all.
Okay.
Hey,
Charlie.
if I could just add one thing to Derek's comments. I feel like I'm getting a little bit re-traumatized here. The boat that he sank was my boat, and when the insurance company tried to salvage it, he apparently sank it in the deepest part of Georgian Bay, and after a couple of weeks, they gave up trying to find it. So,
Yes, Roy, you're right. I should have credited you to be the owner of the boat that sank. And Joseph, I would be happy to give a read to your first draft anytime.
Thank you, Derek. Yeah.
There were a lot of people on the island who knew Michael very, very well. He was deeply loved by peoples of all backgrounds, the Jewish community, the Native community. He was just a person who was highly effusive and just embraced people who crossed his path. Now, if he didn't like you, then you would know it pretty quickly. But more often than not, as Joseph said before, yeah, I didn't see a lot of that in Michael, but he was very specific on who he embraced and who he didn't. And when he did, he was all in, and he was just full of love, and he was full of caring. And there were people down the road, Donna and Rich, who have a cottage up on the island, and maybe you can speak about Michael from your perspective as a down the road neighbor.
Well, when the boat sank, we were at the main dock waiting for him with blankets and food. And yeah, he had a hard time. So I'm Donna, and we were neighbors, and we put our heads together. My brother Rich is here as well, and my daughter Ray is here, and I think Ray is going to speak for the family. So over to you, Rhea.
So like my mother said, the three of us became very close with Mike through Christian Island. And Mike was just simply unforgettable. I actually have no memory of meeting Mike at the island. He was sort of just always there. And as soon as we would get up to the cottage, every time, the first thing we would do was catch up with Mike, have a visit. He was such a dreamer, and he chased his dreams so tenaciously. When I think of Mike, I think of a special man, from his walrus mustache to his long silver ponytail and the shoeless Joe look that so many people have already talked about. As he ambled down the dirt roads of Christian Island, he was a self-proclaimed rock star, and he brought so much music and magic into all of our lives. Music was his language, and he ensured that his concerts were always fabulous, memorable, and such great fun. The multicultural aspects of his concerts gave me a sense of being rooted in many people's histories, including the Indigenous, and that tradition that he began on the island is still ongoing today. Mike loved to involve everyone in his concerts, so whether I was singing or filming them, it always just felt like a family get-together. He would always request that I sing Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, which happened to be one of his most favorite songs. When I met Mike, or when we met Mike rather, he was living on the mainland in his sailboat, but he had always had bigger dreams of having a bigger boat. He was a visionary, and when he became the owner of the prized 38-foot sailboat, it was a dream come true. He loved to anchor it off of the dock at Ellie's cottage and spend his time puttering about the deck, and then take it out to his favorite fishing spots. Mike loved showing kids how to handle the boat, and he even had no issues with passing the helm over to me at the age of 8, while he sat back and just made occasional comments on how to catch the best wind with the mainsail and how to point the boat in the right direction. He, in fact, proudly proclaimed himself as the Commodore of the non-existent Christian Island Yacht Club. And as he always said, the membership fee was a bottle of gin. Mike earned his name MacGyver because when he couldn't find a starter for the motorboat, he simply rigged up a regular light switch from a house, which looked strange, but it actually worked. There was very little that he couldn't accomplish with a roll of duct tape and his rusty toolbox. And anything he fixed might even work. Mike's generosity was so far-reaching. When I first went aboard his boat, the Sinfin, he surprised me because he insisted on adding my name to the stern of the boat. He wanted me to feel like I was home. But being with Mike, no matter where or what we did, it always felt like being home, and we miss him so much. As we all know, Mike loved fishing, as many people have said already. And along with the other kids, Mike taught me how to fish. It was often followed up with lessons on filleting the fish that we had just caught, and of course, the best homemade fish fries on the island. In fact, one time when we were invited to a fish fry at his place, we showed up as planned, but Mike was nowhere to be found. So we assumed that, he might be having a siesta after a long day in the sun. No, he wasn't in bed. So we waited, and then an hour later, we found him next door with a neighbor. And it turned out they had been talking, as Mike had insisted on helping the neighbor with some important task. That was Mike. Dinner could wait. Helping friends always came first. Mike will always have a special place in the heart of our family. His robust laughter, his incredible warmth in his stories, his sharing of everything will never be forgotten. Mike, we all know that you dreamed of sailing to the south, or as he used to say himself, sailing south until the butter melted. So Mike, wherever you and Zodie have sailed, know that you always live in our hearts and memories, with meaning, laughter, and music. And so I say, hallelujah, Mike. We love you the most. From Rhea Rich and Donna Trivitz.
Thank you, Rhea. That was lovely. That was lovely. Donna, Rich, is there anything you want to add to that?
How do you follow Rhea?
You don't really. You really don't.
It's, you know what? Listening to everyone, we all have the same feeling in our hearts, how Michael affected us. You with the initial fuck off, that's hello for Mike.
Yeah.
You know, that was a person who was warm, who was generous, who was giving. And as others have said, this is someone who could talk about everything and anything. He had an opinion. He was well read. He loved family. It's to me an honor to see some of his family and his younger uncle. That one always flipped me. So I'm glad I finally see a face to go with it. As Rhea said, we will really deeply, truly miss Michael. And Ellie, thank you for doing what you did so we got to meet Michael.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rich. Donna, do you have anything to say?
I just want to thank you all for sharing. It was so deeply poignant and funny, and Rhea, I think for our family, you expressed it. And we were at the island pre-Michael and still remain on the island. And really, I think those were among our happiest times. And Ellie and Avram, you made such a difference in Michael's life. And the fact that our kids are here and they're now grown and they can look back and want to be part of this is a real testament to Michael and his spirit. So this will be remembered, and thank you.
Thank you. Guy Meneg, it's a real honor to have you here tonight as a former chief of Christian Island. You talked a few minutes ago. I'm wondering if there's anything that you'd like to add from your perspective of Michael.
Well, Guy, you have the beautiful note that you sent me. You want to read that?
You have to unmute, Guy. Let's see if I can do that. Yeah, there you go. Okay, yeah, there you are.
Okay. Before I read the little story I sent last year, I just want to share another story before I actually met the Giffords. In 1980, I worked in the city for a bit, and I met up with this guy, Howard Martin, and I worked with him in a project downtown. So we became really good friends, and he asked me to go to a party up in Thornhill where he lived, and he told me about the Giffords, who lived down the road from him, and he said this was before I met the Giffords as well. So he told me this family goes up to Beckwith Island every summer, and I said, no way. And so we went up to, I couldn't remember where the party was, but there was a band playing. And so I met the Martin family as well as some of the Giffords. I'm not sure if you were there, Dave. It might have been before your time, but this was around 1980. So anyway, so that was kind of neat to see how we're somehow connected, and we meet up with somebody that we know. And so Mike always talked about that. So that's why he can think of somebody that's connected, and all our families are connected somehow. And so I'll share a little story I wrote last year. And my mother and father, Gerald and Stella Monague, always talked about Mike, which my mother referred to him as the kind hippie. And they were always glad to meet up with the Gifford family when they camped out at Beckwith during the 80s, the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I believe they met the Giffords out there. So my mother loved to camp, and she made sure that she took everything with her for her week-long camp out. Sometimes it would turn into 2 weeks. when we were a little older, then we would visit the camp for a few hours and get to meet the Gifford family as well. They usually held camp fairly close to each other, and I think the Giffords were up on the hill. And my mom liked to set up camp pretty close to them as well. So it was always a pleasure and a laugh to meet the Gifford family and exchange stories at the campfire, and sometimes late night parties until the wee hours before the sun rose. I didn't meet Mike until early 2000s, and a little more often when he was working at Ellie's cottage on the island. I always enjoyed the stories and the huge laughter when he told stories. We would sometimes play tunes, and he joined me at performances on the island, and I enjoyed and I connected with him with his carefree attitude, lifestyle. And some people could only wish they had a taste of that lifestyle. I always admired that free lifestyle that he had and carefree attitude. So everyone knew Mike in the village. They were his friends, and most people didn't seem to mind that he's hung out here year round. They knew it was going to be a long winter if he started wearing shoes by October. So long, my friend, I remember you in a song as the waves hit the shores of the beach with a wild west wind on the beaches of Beckwith Island. Miigwech. And I'd like to share just a couple of verses of a song that always reminds me of Mike. And I don't want to play the whole song because yesterday I performed at a concert and I kind of overdid it. And I'm just going to play a couple of verses of this song. I'm sailing down summer wind. I got whiskers on my chin, and I like the mood I'm in. As I wound away the time of day in the lee of Christian Island. Tall and strong, she slips along, sing for her song, and she leans to the wind. She's a good old boy, she'll stay along through the toughest scales, smiling. When the summer ends, we rested again in the lee of Christian Island. When the summer ends, we rested again in the lee of Christian Island. Good.
Thank you, Guy. That was lovely. I think for me anyways, I would not have known Michael in the way that I did had he not developed a relationship with Ellie. And once he had, the full Monty was there. Like I was able to see Michael domestically. I was able to see him at work, as people have talked about, and with other people, with friends and family, and he was just magnificent. I want to call on Ellie to wrap things up tonight. And just to say to all of you, family and friends, that I guess this group won't get together again. This is a one-off in life, but it is so significant because we all shared one thing, and that was a great love and appreciation for Michael Gifford. We all knew him in our own way, but we all appreciated him. We all saw his foibles. We all saw his greatness. And in some ways, Michael Gifford and his spirit was able to bring us together and has done so again tonight. So God bless your soul, Michael Gifford. Thank you for coming our way. You added a lot to each one of our lives, and for that we will always be grateful, and you will be tremendously missed for what you brought to this world. So Ellie, if you can wrap things up.
Yes, before I do a couple of things. First of all, I know that Silvio's on the line. Silvio, do you want to add anything to what you've heard about Michael? If you do, you have to unmute Silvio. Maybe you can't hear me. Okay, maybe you can't hear. So I have Bonnie on the line. Bonnie knew the Gifford family going back many years. Bonnie, you want to say a few words? She's on my speakerphone. That's why I got the phone on my chest. Bonnie?
Yes.
Do you want to say a few words to the group assembled to remember Mike?
First of all, my condolences to the family and friends. My husband and I knew the Gifford family from when we were first married, and Tom met them probably through the boat because they were going back and forth to Beckwith. And as we became family friends, they invited us to Beckwith Island every year on our anniversary and other times. And Angela always baked us a cake, even on Beckwith Island. And they would bring our family back home before dark on their little boat.
Bonnie, you're getting people nodding with smiles on their faces. People are smiling. Mm-hmm.
And there was just not a nicer family that I could have ever met.
Oh, those are beautiful words, Bonnie. I know John is with you. John Kopacog, who's a great guitar player and singer. Does he want to say hello for a moment?
Hello, Ellie.
Hi, John. You want to say a few words about Mike to the group?
Yeah, I met him at your cottage, and I met him kind of through Cindy. Got me down to play music and that, and he ended up taking Cindy and I out fishing quite a number of times in that one summer. We had a lot of fun. He was a musician. He was good at it. He made me play a lot slower than I normally do. But that was okay. I enjoyed teaching him. It was fun. He was a great guy. We did some traveling, did some road trips together. It was a lot of fun. It was good to know. It was great to know him.
Well, John, I know he also valued your not just your musicianship, your friendship. So thank you for all those years of being a companion to Mike. He's a big fan of yours.
He was a great guy.
Great, thank you. Do you guys want to stay on the line to listen to the rest of the memorial? Just a few minutes.
Love to.
Okay, we'll just keep you on speaker. Okay, so thank you for those memories. Just before I say what I wanted to say, I also have a beautiful message from Cindy King. She's at the Elvis Presley concert in Midland right now. Not the real Elvis Presley. I think he's actually not around anymore, but some Elvis impersonator. I know some people think Elvis is still alive. So she sent a note. Cindy says, Chi Miigwech, Michael, thank you for your friendship, guidance, fishing tips, music, hospitality. Go to the angels, Michael, until we meet again, with much love from Cynthia King and family. And also one other thing, beautiful message from Cindy. Also Archie Kopacog also had some, really Archie Bunker, we used to call him, had some beautiful words to say about Mike when I spoke to him earlier today. And I also want to thank Rhea for her just touching remarks. And Rhea, you and Charlie should know that Michael absolutely adored you both. He thought you kids were the greatest kids you can possibly meet. And he just always spoke so glowingly of you. And so thank you for those beautiful words. So I met Michael, I don't know how many years ago, through my good friend Avram. And before I knew it, he was helping out at my cottage and did a whole bunch of things at the cottage, too numerous to recount here. So let me just give you a couple of things that he did at the cottage. First of all, he took the cottage and turned bricks and stones into a real home. He beautified so many aspects of the cottage, from the beach area to the fire pit, to the walkway down to the beach, to the new stone facing that makes the outside of the cottage so striking. He really, really treated the cottage as if it was his own home, made it a much more beautiful place than it initially was when I got it. Secondly, we have a statement in our Jewish tradition that says, greater than the reception of God is hospitality to strangers. Greater than the reception of God is hospitality to strangers. And Michael was the most hospitable host you could possibly imagine. Every single person who went to the cottage would come back, will not just talk about the natural beauty of the area, but also Mike's warmth and hospitality and his welcoming nature. And most of all, they talked about Michael's stories. And as you all know, Michael had the best of stories. And what's even more important, some of his stories were even true. But he was really a huge part of the entire Christian Island experience for me and my family and my friends. 3, Michael just loved the Christian Island area and the 30,000 islands in general, and he cannot stop singing the praises of the natural beauty of Georgian Bay. Because of much of the time I couldn't go up to the island because of work or because of health, but I still enjoyed the cottage and the area vicariously through Michael's enthusiastic weather reports and constant updates of what was going on the island, from the natural wildlife to the weather, to the cats he adopted, to the squirrels he was feeding, to the winds, to the waves. Michael's always giving me an update on what's going on the island. So I always felt like I was almost there through Michael. And the one thing I always remember Michael is the gusto in his voice on a beautiful day. I'd say, Michael, what's it like up Christian Island? He'd say, it's just a stellar day, stellar. And no one would say that word, stellar, with more emphasis, more enthusiasm, more joy when Mike said the word stellar day, just looking at a stellar day out on Georgian Bay. Michael was in many ways an impresario and would organize all sorts of events on the island. His biggest effort was the Burning Man Festival he organized in West Beach that drew hundreds of people to the island and all sorts of incredible experiences he was a major part of. But he also used to organize, as you all know, yearly concerts at the cottage and brought together some of the most incredible and talented musicians whose music you can still watch on YouTube. And I urge you all to check out some of the music, including John Kopakok on the line. We post from these events. And from time to time, you'll see Michael wandering into camera view, playing bass. And of course, if you can't recognize him, he's the one without any shoes on, always walking around barefoot, as we all remember. And lastly, I want to also talk about Michael's love of sailing and how much time he spent dreaming about getting a new sailboat when his old one broke down. When he finally got the new sailboat, he had a bit of time on it before he had some problems, but he's still dreaming of fixing up the boat and sailing all the way down to Florida, if you remember, which is probably unrealistic, but that kept him going for so long. And Michael's life reminded me of the famous quote, a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven's for? A man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? In Jewish tradition, we have a concept of two Jerusalems, the Jerusalem of this world, of rocks and stones and bricks and mortar, the physical Jerusalem, and the Jerusalem in the very heavens, the ethereal, ideal, sort of utopian Jerusalem. Michael, I'm sure you're now in Georgian Bay in the heavens, sailing through eternity, riding every beautiful wave on a cloudless day, a stellar day, in fact. Michael, may you sail on in peace forever. And I want to conclude with two poems. One is a poem from First Nations tradition, another poem is from the Jewish tradition. And given Michael's love for the area and his hospitality to so many members of my family, I thought these two poems would be very appropriate. The first poem is from Chief Tecumseh, who lived from apparently 1768 to 1813 from the Shawnee Nation. The poem goes like this. Live your life that the fear of death can never enter your heart. Trouble no one about their religion, respect others in their view, and demand they respect yours. Love your life, perfect your life, beautify all things in your life. Seek to make your life long of its purpose in the service of your people. Prepare a noble death song for the day when you go over the great divide. Always give it a word or a sign of salute when meeting or passing a friend, and even a stranger when in a lonely place. Show respect to all people and cower to none. And when you rise in the morning, give thanks to the food and for the joy of living. And if you see no reason for giving thanks, the fault lies only in yourself. Abuse no one and nothing, for abuse turns the wise ones into fools and robs the spirit of its vision. And when it comes to your time to die, be not like those whose hearts are filled with the fear of death, so when their time comes, they weep and pray for a little more time, to live their lives over and again in a different way. Rather, sing your death song and die like a hero going home. That's from Chief Tecumseh from the Shawnee Nation. And the other poem is called After My Death by a poem by the name of Chaim Nachman Bialik, who lived about 100 years ago. And the poem goes like this. After I'm dead, say this at my funeral. There was a man who exists no more, the man who died before his time, and his life song was broken off halfway. Oh, he had one more poem, and that poem has been lost forever. He had a violin and a vital quivering soul. The poet in him spoke and gave it all his heart's secrets. His hand struck all the chords of the violin, but there was one secret he kept hidden, though his fingers danced everywhere. One string stayed mute and is still soundless. But alas, all its days, that string trembled softly, quivered for the poem that would free her, yearned and thirsted and grieved and wept, as though pining for some unexpected who does not come. And the more he delays, the more she whimpers with a soft and fine sound, but still he does not come, and the agony is very great. There was a man, and he exists no more. His life song was broken off halfway. He had one more poem, and that poem is lost forever. Poem by Chaim Nachman Bialik. And I'm reminded of one last quote. There was a great rabbi who lived a few hundred years ago. His name was Zusha, and he was asked when he was about to pass away, what he was afraid was going to happen in the afterlife. when God meets him, and he says, "I'm not afraid God is not going to ask me, why weren't you like Abraham or Jacob or Isaac or Moses? I'm afraid God is going to say, Zusha, why weren't you like Zusha? Why weren't you yourself?" And Michael, above all else, was always himself. He was the most unique, one of the most unique, original people I've ever met. He certainly lived a life according to the beat of his own drummer, and we all love him and will always miss him. Thank you.
So thank you, Ellie. And I'd like to conclude with the mourner's prayer. It's called Kaddish in Hebrew. And at the end of each line, if you can say Amen. And after that, unless anybody wants to add anything, sing anything, say anything, we're going to wrap up for the night.
I do have one last comment at the end. So after the Kaddish, I do want to make one more comment.
Okay. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shmei Rabbah. V'yama divrach v'rutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayichona v'yamechona v'chayi dechal beit Yisrael. Ba'agala zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'elam u'me'al maya. Yitborah v'yishtabach v'yitborah v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. Yitadar v'yitalel v'yitalal shmei dikucha b'richu. Le'ela minkal b'chata v'shirata. Tushbachata v'nachamata. Damiram b'yama v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kal Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'yal kal Yisrael v'imru amen. Ellie.
Thanks. Before I say anything, does anybody want to add anything before I say one last thing?
Thank you, Ellie. That was beautiful.
Thank you, Bonnie and John. Very much appreciate you coming on even like this. Thank you. Appreciate it. So thank you. So one last little comment, last chance. Anybody else want to say anything? Okay, so one of the most important ways of honoring people who've passed away is by honoring and exemplifying their values. And since Michael was the most hospitable person you could possibly imagine, everybody on this call is hereby invited from now till eternity to come to visit my cottage. If you haven't been there, please come and visit. It's my pleasure and my greatest joy to have that. I'm not one of those people, they're going to show up and say, "What are you doing here?" I was just kidding. I didn't really mean it. I was being nice. Really from the bottom of my heart, please be in touch with me. And I'm sure we have all your contact information somewhere. Please just, I'll give you my email now. It's elir@bell.net. Pretty easy to remember. Elir, last name is Rubenstein, @bell.net. Like you can ring my bell. Don't worry, I won't sing. elir@bell.net. And if you haven't been to Christian Island recently, please, in honor of Michael's memory, please come and visit and say hello. It would be my greatest joy to host you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And when you leave, turn off the air conditioning, right?
If I only had.
Anyways, God bless his family and his friends. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you, Michael, for coming our way. Lila Tov Miigwech. Shalom.
All the best, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Avram and Ellie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.